This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 172 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today's topic is helping others when we travel. I know very well that I'm extremely privileged, well, actually in like 100 different ways, but I'm particularly privileged to lead the life that I do and be able to travel reasonably regularly. Obviously when I travel, I'm often on the lookout for ways to give back, especially in the last decade when I've been traveling with my son. However, I also know it's really fraught with kind of difficulty to get right. There's not always a simple way to help, especially when you're in another country and another culture. Anyway, the point being, today I have 3 stories from different travelers who found some really interesting ways of getting involved with helping other people in combination with their travels. So I hope you'll enjoy them. Now, my first guest is Veronica Sherman, and she started off by telling me about a time when she was living in Cambodia. So she's currently living in Australia with her 4 kids, but a while back she was living in a rural area in Cambodia with the kids. At the time they were aged like 2 to 11. And she told me this story just as a preamble to what we'll hear from Veronica today. She was getting into the back of a tuk-tuk fairly early in their stay with the kids, with their ice creams that they'd just gone to get. And she's getting back into the tuk-tuk and there's a tug on her arm. And she sees it's from a teenage girl with a tiny baby kind of wrapped up. And she's asking for something. She can't understand, what, but presumably money or food or something. And of course, Veronica felt really confronted. What do I do? How do I help? This is really tricky. She had literally just read in a magazine or guidebook or somewhere in a cafe about, you shouldn't give money to beggars. That keeps them in the poverty cycle and doesn't solve anything and all of that. But, when you're confronted with it right there, it's, it's really hard. Anyway, on that day, she did nothing, but it made her really keen to do something that had a bigger impact. And she started a business called Happily Made, which employs Cambodian women to make gorgeous toys, especially but not exclusively monkeys, that are then sold elsewhere in the world. And I got Veronica to tell me a bit more about that and some other ways that she tries to help people when she travels.
So I was on the back of a tuk-tuk and I had recently met Monica from Cambodia Knits, and I really liked what she was doing because she had a knitting project. And at this time, I was living in the south of Cambodia in a tiny village outside of Kampot. And I had a tiny, tiny sewing project. But I met Monica with the knitting project, and I just thought it would be great if we could have a product that we could do together. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to think of something that would work well. And she'd had these little finger puppets that I liked, but I mean, my kids lose finger puppets within like 20 seconds. They just don't last in our house. So I was like, what's something we can do? What's something we can do? And I actually thought of this little monkey that kept popping back into my mind. And I thought, what if we made the monkey as a complete monkey with limbs and everything, not just a finger puppet, and give him a way to attach around the shopping bags that we were making at the time. Because I would go to the market and get all this, it's called upcycled fabric, which sounds really snazzy, but it's basically offcuts from factories that would otherwise go into landfill.
Right.
And women are just, trying to sell pieces of fabric. So you never know what you're going to find. And so the women who were sewing in my house were making these shopping bags. This is a little bit, before it got really trendy to have fabric shopping bags.
Of course, yes.
And and I thought, it'd be so cool to like roll up the shopping bag and then the monkey could hug it. But how will the monkey be able to hug it? And then I came up with the idea of magnets. So that's sort of how it started. And then from that, it's just sort of grown in its own way. And the funny thing is, and I just recently had to write all this down because I was starting a Kickstarter campaign, and they want the whole background. And I was
Right.
just thinking through, and I was like, I've never had a business plan. I've never, I've never actually had any idea what's happening next. It's just been so impulsive and so kind of, I don't know what the word, I don't want to use the word
Organic.
organic. That's a really nice way of putting it.
It's a nice way to say it just happened without me really thinking about it. Yeah.
I think the word impulsive
sums it up better.
Might be a bit better, but it's just that whole idea that it's just been like, oh my gosh, here's a need. What can I do? Or well, we've trained more women. We need more products for them to make, or and it's just been such a weird and wonderful experience in the sense that mainly weird. Someone who has zero business background, all the sort of like terms and stuff that business people use, like I have no idea what they're talking about. And but at the same time, sort of just feeling so motivated to keep, finding work for these women that obviously need it. So yeah, that's kind of a very small nutshell of how it's evolved.
That's pretty cool. I love it. Yeah. It's so far ahead of giving, a couple of dollars to the girl who takes your sleeve on the street, isn't it? It's, so much more sustainable in so many ways.
It is for me, but not for her. Like,
well, true. Yes. But if everyone did stuff like this, then she wouldn't be there.
No, exactly. And that's the thing. And that's why in those cafes they had printed out, make sure you put your money towards, organizations that are doing long-term impact. And that's what it comes back to. But oh my gosh, like at the end of the day, having those faces and knowing that they might be going hungry that night, that is pretty big.
Yeah. And how do we get past that? Because that still happens.
Well, exactly. How do we get past that? I don't have an answer for that. And at least I can channel my frustration and my privilege and my discomfort into what I'm doing now.
Which helps lots of people, but
exactly.
It's when there's someone in front of you, she's still in front of you.
Exactly. And I feel like I need to keep that still in my mind's eye, instead of just getting too carried away with the kind of, oh yeah, we're doing this and we're doing that, it's like, yeah. And I should add that I think that experience, it must have just made my brain switch into this other gear, because now when I travel, it seems to be like my mind is just wired to see the women who are needing assistance. Like I was recently in Bali. I met my mom in Bali for a week. She'd never been, and she's coming to Australia. It was a long flight. I was like, you know what? Let's meet in Bali. We'll have a week there. And we stayed at this fishing village, and, just watching the women, carrying, sitting there, taking all the fish out of the nets, and then carrying the big buckets of fish on their heads for ages in the heat. And, I'm just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. That's hard work.
It's hard work. It's such hard, it's such manual labor. And I was in Bangladesh, it's actually coming up to 2 years ago, but just stepping out of, a taxi, and there's this cement truck and these women, and actually I have a photo of this, and they're just carrying huge cement, on their heads.
Oh.
And this is in like heat, that's unexplainable heat.
Far out.
And then, and they're wearing saris, and they got these, big, buckets of cement on their heads. And they're not young women. Like a lot of them are, old women. Mm-hmm. And it's so confronting to see that. And it just, like, I think, I'm a solo parent here in Australia. So I do kind of connect with, women on the fringes of society, so to speak. And I do understand how important it is for, women to be supported and to have, employment or to have support, around them. So I think it's especially hard then when I go into these countries and I see women who, really have it tough, but they don't have that safety network of, Centrelink or, whatever it is, extended families who have help.
Yeah.
Who can give them help. So that's for me, it really, it's just so obvious that the biggest thing that we can do is create employment for these women, and not just any employment, but, fair employment and
Yeah.
flexible employment.
Lots of food for thought there. Now, Veronica mentioned a Kickstarter campaign, and I'll give you a bit more info at the end because it's just launched. If you're listening to this in real time, it's open during January and February 2020. Now, my next guest today is Marilyn from the WOW Travel Club, and she has another really interesting way that she's been able to get involved with helping people when she travels.
One of the things that I'm very keen to develop more and more as a bigger component of my business moving forward is philanthropic travel and connection with women. I've been involved for about a dozen years with an organization here in the U.S. called Dining for Women, and I host a potluck dinner every month at my home, invite my friends and anybody for whom I have an email address, and they bring a dish, and there's a couple of bottles of wine, and we talk, we laugh, we giggle, we get to know each other better, and then we learn about a project somewhere in the developing world that is dedicated to supporting women and girls, whether it's education or microloans to allow them to start businesses, or learning, helping them learn about maternal and female issues, be it, reproductive health. The idea of female genital mutilation is a big topic in parts of Africa, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, so I've taken some members of this organization on trips. I did 2 to Vietnam that were really transformational for me personally, because I just so love the idea of in this case, they were women-only trips. And in Vietnam, the culture, for whatever reason, if you are a single mother, even if your husband died or he abandoned you or whatever the circumstances, if you're a single mother, you're kind of on your own. Even your family doesn't necessarily support you very much. So they really struggle, and more than normal. And all they want to do is send their kids to school. All they want is for their kids to be educated. So I organized these programs, and we visited a lot of these single mothers outside of Da Nang, and we spent 2 days doing various things. We split up into small groups of I think about six people per group. I think there were 18 of us in total in the program or in the group. And we visited a market where a woman had gotten, for $600 or $700 a microloan, so she could now sell vegetables in the market. And we visited another home where a woman used the microloan to buy a sewing machine, so she was now a tailor. Another one had bought a cow so she could sell dairy and milk products. And the hugs and the kisses were just so warm and wonderful. But one of the things that we did, which initially I was very annoyed, they took us to a government office, and it was all of us Americans, and some of the women from the organization, and about 3 of these ladies from the local community. And we sat around a big rosewood table in a conference room with a bust of Ho Chi Minh on the wall, and these uniformed Vietnamese men sitting at one end of the table, and these little ladies sitting at the other end. They were all kind of meek and nervous, and we were sitting on the sides. And I was like, why are we here? It was all in Vietnamese, and I was kind of looking at my watch going, we could be doing something more interesting. And I was going to, kind of ream out my supplier, like, what was that all about? We probably had been prepared, but I might not have been paying attention. What I learned later was that the local authorities, i.e. the government officials, wanted to know, why were these Americans visiting? Like, what was going on?
Right.
And so they had sort of called this impromptu meeting to try to get to the bottom of it. And what happened was these women who were so disenfranchised and underserved were being visited by this group of, prestigious Americans, and it raised the stature of these women. It raised the awareness by the local government of their plight. And on the last day we were there was this luncheon planned, and all the ladies in this program got together and cooked a big meal for us, and these government officials were invited to that. And we had the best time. There was a little bit of Mekong whiskey involved. And it was this phenomenal experience all around of, we learned so much about their local culture. They learned about us. The government officials learned about the experience of these women and how difficult it was for them to send their kids to school, because even though the school is free, they still have to pay for books and uniforms and transportation, etc. And it was just, it talk about women's empowerment. It hit home on so many levels for all of us, that it was, I'd say, life-changing for all of us.
That's magical that even the government then actually, was involved and you were able to kind of highlight those issues, even not intentionally, but that's how it worked out. That's wonderful.
Yeah, we have a lot of influence beyond just the money that we can donate or the books or supplies that we can drop off someplace, but to recognize that, we can really, if it's done right, really kind of make a lasting impact beyond the stuff that we might bring. So that was a powerful lesson for me, because again, I hadn't really thought about, a group of Americans, dropped into some small town somewhere in the middle of nowhere. We can have some effect.
It was really interesting to hear Marilyn's story, particularly with the seemingly useless visit to the government office. That was actually really useful and important. So often it's really important to kind of trust the local people to know what is the best way that you can make an impact, even if you don't really understand until later what's really going on. So I thought that was a really good lesson. And I would have been equally surprised and, confused about what effect it would have until I'd, heard all of that story. Interesting stuff. Now, my final guest today is the delightful Raf from Boy Eats World. And he has recently been to South Africa. And he told me a lot about, all sorts of his amazing experiences in South Africa, including, all the animals and all of that kind of stuff. But then he actually surprised me by going on to tell me what had made a much bigger impact on him than the animals and all the cool stuff.
We learned about apartheid, which is the segregation of people based on race, which led to extreme discrimination, mainly based on skin color and facial features. And though thanks to people like Nelson Mandela, it ended in the 1990s, the impact of it still remains, and the country suffers from a racial divide, with the average white household still earning like 6 times more than a black household. And that's absolutely not okay. And did you know that the almost half of South Africa's population live below the global poverty line? We learned about this on a visit to Kailicha, a township with a population of over 1 million that is one of the poorest in Cape Town. But the people living there are the coolest. We visited with Utando, South Africa, a not-for-profit tour company that raises funds for community development in poor townships. And we got to visit art and music projects, including Cassie RC, a Shack Art School and Theatre, which is just an epic performing arts training and performance space that gives the local children a voice and a safe space where they can be seen, heard, and stay focused on a positive future away from gangs and drugs and horrible stuff like that. because that's so common around the townships.
Mm.
And not only were the children the legit best actors I've ever seen. I mean, forget all the mega stars and everything. They were pushing out tears. It was amazing. But like they even let us join in their drama lesson, which was really fun. Although I'm not sure if they were ready for my worm when they asked me to bust on my best improv dance move.
Oh, that sounds like a fun moment.
Yeah, but even though that was incredible, the real game changer was actually one adorable little girl, our South African sister, Crystalie, a tiny 8-year-old girl from a township slum who my family has been supporting for a while with stuff like school uniforms, clothes, shoes, and books. My mum first met her through the amazing Bud Higgins and her Tin Mugs Africa Trust charity. I think Bud must be probably the kindest person on the planet. I mean, kids, it's just incredible. Anyway, we got to take Crystalie and her mum out for a day, which might not sound like that big a deal, but honestly, the way they live, like Crystalie isn't even allowed to play outside her shack. The area they live in is just so dangerous. It was a really big deal. We went to see the seals at the seaside and feast on fish and chips, and like a massive feast of fish and chips, which was brilliant for them. And we visited a safe playground with Crystalie, and it was just the best. Like Crystalie, she's just so full of joy and spark and positivity, despite how little she has. And it was the best day ever for me because I got to see firsthand what a positive difference one person can make on another. Because she made as much of a difference to me as I hope our help is making a difference for her. And I guess that's what travel's all about, you know?
Absolutely. Oh, Raph, you're going to make me cry with that story. That's beautiful. What a special day.
It was amazing.
Oh, that's fabulous. There's really something special about being able to help someone and over the longer term so you can see the difference and get to meet them.
Yeah, and like getting to connect with people and like firsthand from other countries proves that there should not be any barriers between races. We're all just the same.
When he's thinking this way now, I can't wait to see what Raph does when he's a fully fledged adult and really out in the world. I think he'll do make some big changes around the place. And I like to think that there's a lot of that generation. It's similar to my son's age, you know, growing up with a new perspective on the world and a real desire to help where they can. So I thought that was a great story. Thanks, Raph. Now, I have lots of links and info for you today because I hope that there'll be, you know, some of these organisations that you might like to find out more about. So just a heads up that all of the links will be in the show notes, and the show notes for this episode are at notaballerina.com/172 because, of course, this was episode 172. So first up, I chatted with Veronica from Happily Made. And you can find all of the cool products that Happily Made sells, which have been produced by the women they've provided work for in Cambodia at happilymade.com.au. And as I said, if you're listening to this as it comes out, so in early 2020, then Veronica's got a Kickstarter running. I have already pledged in it because I want a sloth. If you go to the website, you will find the sloths. Anyway, the Kickstarter campaign has a long link for it, of course. But if you go to the show notes, you can see that Kickstarter. It ends on the 1st of March, 2020. So good luck with that, Veronica. It looks like a really awesome project. After that, I chatted with Marilyn Murphy from the WOW Travel Club. And so you can find out more about her business there at wowtravelclub.com. Marilyn also mentioned Dining for Women, and I thought I should also leave a link for that. So it's at diningforwomen.org. Unfortunately, it's US based only, but I know that I have heaps and heaps of US listeners. So if I were in the US, I would be looking that up and getting involved. It sounds really cool. And last but very far from least, I chatted with Raph, who is the boy of his mum Elaine's blog, Boy Eats World, boyeatsworld.com.au. And I'll leave a link in the show notes to a few of the other places in South Africa that he mentioned that they did some work with, including the Cassie RC Shack Art School and Theatre, Utando, and Tin Mugs Africa Trust, which is at tinmugs.org. That's a quick one. That's easy. All right. So, as always, please hop over to the Facebook group for Thoughtful Travellers. It's in the show notes, or just search for Thoughtful Travellers in Facebook. Especially in there, I would love to hear about any other ways that you have helped people out as you travel. I'm always really keen to find like local NGOs or, other kinds of organisations or small businesses that are really doing good work that we can all kind of, find out about and help out if we're, in the area. It's always good to have personal recommendations. In fact, one of my projects for 2020 is to create a page on the website that has kind of a list of all these places that I keep gathering from, people, guests and other friends who know, who've been there and know, yeah, this place, they're really helping, or this isn't, because I think that's really useful. Anyway, thank you very much for listening, and enjoy the rest of your travels for the year, because I keep forgetting to say, we're at the beginning of the year. So happy travels and happy thoughtful traveling. And thank you very much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.